Alright, cool. So you got the recording started already? Alright, so welcome to another episode of the Men of Culture podcast. We're here again to talk about some more Percy Jackson. You know, in the last episode, we really started with episode 2. We kind of did a little recap of what happened in episode 1. But this time we're going to start off with episode 3. This is where the quest really begins. You know, the quest to retrieve Zeus's lightning bolt, which has been stolen by somebody. You know, everyone believes that Hades is involved. We believe that he has somehow convinced a demigod to steal the lightning bolt to start a war between his brothers. Now, as far as the reason, they're really giving us his jealousy of his brothers, that he's kind of stuck in the underworld and they get to live up on Olympus. So, the idea that they're going for here is that Hades has been jealous of his brothers, basically for all of time, since he was put in control of the underworld, and that by stealing the bolt and starting a war between his brothers, that is his way of kind of taking his revenge in a way. So that is what we're left to believe here at the start of the third episode. So at the beginning, we see that Percy goes and he has to speak to the Oracle. They don't really show this on screen, but Percy is told that a quest is not really a quest until you seek the Oracle. So he goes up to the attic to talk to the Oracle, which is really just a Halloween decoration, as he calls it, because it's literally just like, you know, kind of a mummified person who was alive at one point, not anymore. But this mummy here has the spirit of the Oracle within them. So Percy goes in there to kind of seek the prophecy for the quest, and then it spews out like all this green smoke, and it's kind of weird and creepy. And I actually really liked this scene with the Oracle, because like the Oracle was portrayed to be very creepy in the books, and I feel like they kind of nailed it here. Because Percy walks in and he sees it and he's just like, oh, like, he is just like, you can see that he is kind of scared of this little thing. Like, he is definitely creeped out by it. Like, yeah. Whereas, like, in the movie, there was no Oracle at all. Like, there was no type of prophecy or anything like that. Like, because remember, like, there was no official quest in the movie. Remember, like because in the movie, like, Hades kind of like creates a projection of himself essentially to appear in the camp during like the campfire scene, and then he tells Percy like, "Yeah, I've captured your mother. Bring me the lightning bolt and I'll set her free." So then Percy decides to sneak out and go try to save his mom on his own. And Grover and Annabeth knew that that's what he was going to do, so they were just sitting there waiting for him as he's trying to leave camp, and then they go with him, right? So that's really how the whole quest begins in the movie. But here, and also in the book, Percy seeks out the Oracle. The Oracle gives him the prophecy, and I thought it was kind of hilarious to see, like, it was Gabe giving him the prophecy, because like that happens in the book as well, except like the Oracle makes projections of Gabe and a couple of his friends that always play poker with him, but they didn't really show Gabe playing poker with anybody, because he was playing poker like on his computer in this version. But in the book, he would like actually play physical poker with friends and whatnot. So in the book, it was like Gabe and his friends telling Percy this prophecy. But like to actually see like Gabe appear, and then Percy's like, really? Like, out of all people that you could appear as, you had to appear as Gabe, right? So Gabe is telling him this prophecy, and I thought that was pretty funny. Like, Like, it was already kind of funny in the books to think about it, but to actually see it in person, that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
So, like, he gets the prophecy, and then, like, we hear, like, he's talking about, oh, you know, you have the god out west that has betrayed the rest of them. You have to go and face him, and you'll have to retrieve what is stolen, which is obviously the lightning bolt, right? And we see that even though we don't get the entire prophecy right away, at least we don't see it, we can already see that this prophecy is heavily affecting Percy, like, his attitude, the choices he's making, because he's really taking this prophecy into account when he chooses his quest members, you know? Because, like, in the book, Percy kind of, like, almost brushes the prophecy off, like it doesn't matter, like, because Percy doesn't realize that, like, prophecies kind of always just happen, right? Like, you know, it's not a suggestion. Like, when there's a prophecy created, it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And Percy hasn't really learned that yet, but he's going to learn that as we see throughout the show and, like, and through the book as well. Because, like I said, he kind of, like, brushed it off, kind of, you know, the line that, like, oh, you'll fail to save what matters most in the end, he kind of just brushed that off, like, nah, I'm gonna be able to save my mom. There's nothing they can do to stop me, kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
but, like, in the show, it's really affecting him. Like, it's really, he is, like, really self-conscious about it, because we see that when he's choosing his quest members, when he's choosing Annabeth, like, he talks to Chiron specifically, and is like, well, in order for us to complete this quest, we need somebody who's going to be willing to put the quest before anything else, and he thought Annabeth was the best choice for that. And Chiron agreed with him. So that's where they select Annabeth for. And they select Grover because Grover is his closest friend. Like, so, like, they even literally show us kind of going back and forth between Percy talking to Grover, saying that he chose him, and going back to the prophecy that he's hearing from the Oracle, where it says you're going to be betrayed by someone you consider a friend. And Percy says, well, I trust you. So the whole reason why Percy picked Grover was because he truly believed that if there was anybody that he could absolutely trust to never let him down, it was Grover. And so this was Percy, in a way, trying to beat the prophecy, because he chose the people that he thought would most likely lead to everything turning out the way that he wanted it to. And that was very interesting, because, like, in the book, like, there was no real, like, choosing ceremony in the book, right? I mean, everybody who's on a quest is able to choose their quest mates, but, like, they didn't really do a whole scene like this, where Chiron literally had, like, all of his recommendations kind of lined up in a line, and was like, all right, choose from these people, right? But, like, in the book, like, Chiron was like, oh yeah, you have somebody that's already requested if they can go, and it was Annabeth, and, like, Annabeth was kind of just like, yeah, I'm going whether you like it or not, like, so, like, he didn't really get a choice with Annabeth in the book. Like, Annabeth was just like, yeah, I'm going, so, like, that's how it turned out in the book. But, like, here, there was a whole sequence where he had to choose his quest mates, and, like, I kind of liked that. I liked it, like, they put, like, kind of a lot more thought between, like, specifically Percy picking Grover and Annabeth, and I thought that was really cool. And then, like, after we have that whole choosing ceremony, then, like, you kind of have the scene with Luke and Percy where, like, Percy is explaining to Luke why he didn't choose him, but he almost did, and, you know, and then, like, Luke was, like, there being very understanding, like, look, you know, Grover is a lot stronger than people think he is, like, I don't think you made a bad choice in picking him at all, like, and then he gives Percy the flying shoes, which, we saw the flying shoes in the movie as well, and we see them in the book. The flying shoes are consistent between all three versions of Percy Jackson, but in the book, they actually explain why Percy's not going to wear the shoes. We see that, like, in the show, like, Percy kind of just gives them to Grover, and, like, we're not really given a reason why. But, like, in the book, they actually explain that, like, you know, it's dangerous for Percy to do anything with the air, because, which they do explain that a little bit here, too, because they're like, oh, well, Zeus doesn't like you, so if we go and we fly, then we're basically serving you up on a silver platter to him, right? Which it's the same thing with the shoes. They don't really mention that in the show, but they kind of just expect you to kind of catch on to that, considering that they said Percy can't fly. So they're really trying to just kind of lead you to that same conclusion without really saying it there. Like, whereas in the book, like, as they're getting ready to leave, and, like, Luke comes running right before they leave, he hands him the box, and then he walks away, and then Percy looks at Chiron, and he's like, I'm not going to be able to use these, am I? And he's like, no, like, I wouldn't recommend it. And he was like, Luke meant well, but, you know, it would be dangerous for you to use that. So he gives them to Grover. And in the movie, there's none of that. Percy just uses the shoes. So, like, I remember specifically in the movie, like, the scene where Percy uses the shoes is when they're fighting the Hydra, which, again, that's a new thing. Another new thing that they just decided to put in the movie just because why not?
Oh, yeah. I completely forgot about that, actually, to be honest. Like, I forgot there was a Hydra now that you mentioned it. Like,
yeah, there's a Hydra in the books, but the Hydra did not make an appearance in the first book. So, the Hydra was a completely brand new thing that they decided to just throw into the first movie.
Didn't they, where did they go to visit? Wasn't it a museum? I think it was in a museum, wasn't it? Like,
yeah, it was in a museum because the Hydra actually had one of the pearls.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure.
I remember.
So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so the Hydra had one of the pearls, and then they had to kill the Hydra, and then Percy, like, is, like, flying with the shoes. They video call Luke to have it, which that's another thing, is, like, they completely got rid of, like, the iris messages because the iris messages, they use them all the time in the books, and they used it in the show, like, one time to talk to Luke. But, like, in the movie, they got rid of iris messages. We're like, yeah, you're just gonna video call him. So they video call Luke on how to use the shoes, and then he is explaining to Percy that he has to get a running start to, like, get the wings to come out or something, and that's how he flies to go get the pearl. But then the Hydra comes, and then he's flying and slashing away at the Hydra heads, not realizing that you're just gonna create more heads. and then he's got, like, a bunch of heads trying to, like, bite at him at once, and then they end up using Medusa's head to, like, kill the Hydra. So yes, absolutely. But yeah, it was so that scene is a brand new scene to the movie. Like, I mean, again, the Hydra is in the books, but it did not make an appearance not even close to being this early in the series. So here we're actually with the shoes, like, they're given directly to Grover. They go on the quest. They're on the bus, and the bus scene is really where it really starts to kind of deviate, I feel, because we had a little difference with, like, the whole selection process of Percy choosing his questmates. But right here from the bus is where it starts to really deviate, I feel, because in the book they get on the bus, they're riding on the bus, and the bus stops at one point because they're picking up more passengers, and Miss Dodds and her sister get onto the bus, right?
They all look like they're going on a class field trip in that scene.
Yeah.
They're on the bus, and Miss Dodds was on the bus, but you don't know it until later in the community, like, after they get out of the Phoenix. But they're literally in the back of the bus, arguing like children, pretty much, because they are. And then, Annabeth, like, assuming the role of, like, because she's the most experienced on quests, so she's like, oh, well, I want to be like, I'm the leader because I'm the most experienced, and yada yada yada. And Percy's over here fighting her for it. Grover's like sitting over here trying to like get the two of them to stop fighting. And like, I just like I don't know how much that deviates from the books, or how much it deviates from from the story of the books, but I think that they really did a good job of capturing the fact that there are little children being sent on this quest. But
I think that was a good aspect too. They really captured like Percy and Annabeth's like early relationship, I feel, because they constantly just go back and forth with each other. That's what they do, right? All the time, and they really showed that off here in the show. Now, where this scene deviates from the book here is that in the book, they get on the bus. Again, the bus stops to pick up passengers. Miss Dodds and her sister are two of those passengers, right?
Yeah.
So, what happens is Miss Dodds and her sister start to kind of make their way to the back of the bus to confront all three of them. Annabeth gives Percy her invisibility hat so that he can get away, because they knew that they were after Percy, right? So Percy puts on the invisibility hat, kind of waits for them, sits in a bus seat, waits for them to walk right past him. Then he sneaks past them and is at the entrance of the bus. And Miss Dodds and her sister are like hissing at Annabeth and Grover, asking, where is it, right? And so, in order to try and save them, what happens is Percy kind of like takes off the hat and is like, oh, look, I'm up here, and then they start chasing him. They end up being able to like trap Miss Dodds and her sister in the bus.
Yeah.
Because like at this point, like in the book, what happens is that like the bus stops from all this commotion, and then all the passengers leave.
Uh-huh.
They end up blowing up the bus in the book. So it's kind of crazy. The bus ends up blowing up.
What the fuck?
Yes. They end up blowing up the bus with Miss Dodds and her sister in it. And they also end up blowing up all their supplies because they kind of run out of the bus, not realizing they left their money, their food, and everything that they packed. So, like, literally everything. Extra clothes, the money that they were given by camp, any snacks that they had on them, all of that was blown up and destroyed in the bus explosion.
Yeah.
So, they end up leaving, they end up getting away. They can hear Miss Dodds screaming from the inside of the bus, and then they end up heading more into New Jersey, where they end up finding Medusa's Gnome Emporium, right? In the show, that goes a lot differently. I mean, they still get attacked by Miss Dodds and her sister. Annabeth kills the sister while they're on the bus.
Yeah.
And then they just get out. They just like kind of break through the window and get out.
Yeah.
And run away, and Miss Dodds is chasing them. So
makes sense.
They don't lose all of their supplies in the show. And they just kind of just run away. Miss Dodds is chasing them. They end up making it to the Gnome Emporium. And this is where Medusa is. So again, this is kind of the really big change of this episode, because the whole Medusa scene in general is way different. Like, it's way different than it happened in the book, because in the book, it kind of starts off a little bit the same, whereas they smell food. Like, Grover smells somebody making burgers, and so that leads them to where Medusa is, and it's kind of the same thing in the book. But, like, the difference between the book and in the show is that, like, it's not revealed to be Medusa immediately. Like, and it's kind of similar. Well, no, actually, in the movie, it's kind of the same. Medusa appears and she reveals herself.
I was about
actually.
to say, it looks like, so the movie and the movie and the TV show, like, the Medusa scene kind of ends up happening similarly. A lot of it, but I felt like the show's version felt like more like it's gonna be weird for me to say this, but it felt more like it was out of a book. If that makes sense, like the way that the episode was written, that part specifically, and then the next episode after the entire exchange it gave me the vibe of this is a children's novel, like the way that it was being expedited, right? Like just the overall feel of the scene in general felt more like it was on track. Like it felt more like there was, like it was supposed to be like one of those scenes that was supposed to have exposition that you would expect to be out of a book.
Yeah.
And I know this is like a recurring problem with the show, where it's like, you know, some people say, well, one guy in particular, but I know a lot of other creators were like, yeah, like, you know, there is like a bit of an exposition thing going on in the show, but it's like, that's what I personally would expect from the creator of the books being more involved with the show. Like, you know what I mean? Because it's like, it's supposed to come off more like a novel, but that's like the charm, like that's the whole point of it, I guess. But, you know, like as far as like the TV show and the movie scenes, they kind of happen similarly, except like the only other piece to that is that, like, what was it? Like Percy used his like iPhone 4 or something to like reflect Medusa's gaze back at her to turn her into stone. And I thought that just like
they actually cut off her head in the movie.
Yeah. They cut her head off in the movie, but they technically cut her head off in the show too. It's just the only difference is that like Annabeth had put her invisibility cap on Medusa, so it wouldn't like, you know, they wouldn't see her technically, I guess. But it's like, I guess it's also like a little bit of that Disney magic where it's like, oh, well, we can't show like, you know, certain things because this is a kid show. So that was their way of saying, oh yeah, you know, she's dead, without actually showing like she died. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like in the movie, it was like, yeah, they cut her head off, but then it was like, or rather, like, I guess he used the. Sorry, I misspoke. He used the phone to like tell where she was because she was like, he was hiding, and then he like which
there's no way that you could use the back of an iPhone 4 that was like all silver or whatever.
No, there's no way.
You can see an actual reflection.
No, there's no way.
Like,
there's absolutely no way, bro. Like I had one of those. Like there's absolutely no way that is actually possible. But I will give the movie credit for this, where it's like, I feel like that, like, you could really tell it was like the turn of the century, like just with like the types of references and jokes they would use in that movie, just like just blatantly using like modern technology because they had to emphasize the fact that, oh, this is a modern Greek myth, or so to speak, you know what I mean? So there's gotta be iPhones and FaceTimes, like, you know, there's gotta be like, you know, just what is it, like 2014 lingo speak, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it had so many like dated things in it that I find it super charming now. Back in the day though, when I was a kid, I thought like, man, this movie's kind of cool. Like, you know, I thought it was really serious, and I thought I really was waiting for the second one, but then I never really ended up seeing the second one. But you know, I was like, man, like I could totally get into this movie series. I hope this becomes popular. And then I know that like people didn't really like the second movie that much, but you know, it like, I just felt like that all the jokes they used involving technology, and that scene in particular was just hysterical.
Yeah, it really is. It's funny because it really doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't make
because
any
I'm just
sense.
like, there's no way that you can see a reflection off the back of an iPod.
No,
like, you
no
can't.
way. Absolutely.
There's no way.
No, bro.
And like, where the book kind of is different here than both the movie and the show is that like Medusa doesn't reveal herself immediately. They find this Gnome Emporium. They agree that it's creepy, but they really don't know that it's Medusa yet. Because again, none of them really have experience like going out into the world and like really and like really experiencing all these things. Yeah, I mean Annabeth a little bit because she did face some monsters on her way to camp when she was a kid, and Grover a little bit too. But like none of them immediately recognize that this is Medusa. Whereas like literally once they pull up to the Gnome Emporium in the show, like Annabeth is like, oh, what do we think Auntie M stands for? Like we see all these statues, like who do you think this is? Like they're already like kind of leading us up to it, like revealing it. But like in the book, what happens is that they're all hungry. They smell the burgers, so they end up going to this Gnome Emporium. Medusa is in disguise, kind of like she hasn't revealed herself yet, but she kind of makes herself out to be like this nice older woman who's just running this little business, and you know she doesn't get that many customers or anything. So they're like, oh well, you know she offered to make us food for free, so we'll go ahead and eat it because we're hungry. And remember, in the book, they lost everything. Like, they lost their money, they lost their clothes, they lost the food that they had packed. So, they were hungry and had no food to eat, no money to buy said food, right? So, for them, it was a bigger deal here in the book because they didn't have anything and they were hungry, and they end up at this Gnome Emporium that belongs to Medusa, but they don't know that yet. And Medusa offers to give them food, and then after they get food, then she tries to kind of turn them into stone by saying, oh, let me take a picture of you guys, and like doesn't actually have a camera. So
it's like Jack and Joe when they meet the witch, and like the witch is like fattening them up, so they like make it they make like a more delectable course. You know what I mean? Like, so for her, it's like, oh, let me fatten them up, so they look fat. You know, they turn out to be fatter statues.
Like, and then like they do mention this in the book as well. They mention this both in the book and in the show. But like while they're on the way to the Gnome Emporium in the show, Grover references that it's the same path that his uncle took when he was on his quest. And in the book, Grover sees a statue of a satyr that looks very similar to his uncle. And he kind of hasn't put the pieces together yet that that's him. His uncle got caught by Medusa and she turned him to stone. He's just kind of initially like, oh, that looks a lot like my uncle. Like, and then once they kind of build up the kind of the reveal of Medusa, and she's taking her hat off to like show off the snakes, and then he kind of like dawns on him, no, that really is my uncle. Like, she got him. He's gone, right? And so there's like a whole fight sequence with Medusa in the book, like that we just don't see in the show. And honestly, there's more of a fight with her in the movie because, and this is where a lot of people actually start to dislike some things, is that like, again, the whole Medusa thing felt a little underwhelming in the show because she kind of just reveals herself. Like, Alecto is just scared to go in, so she just kind of sits out there waiting for them.
Right.
And they all go in. Medusa kind of, like, shares her side of the story as far as, you know, how she was before she was turned into a monster, and, you know, how she really looked up to the gods, specifically Athena. And another thing where this is different is that, like, Medusa actually does hold a grudge against Annabeth because she's a daughter of Athena. Like, because Athena is the one who cursed Medusa to be the monster that she is now, right?
Yeah.
So Medusa holds a grudge for all of Athena's children. But in the show, for whatever reason, she is, you know, we see a different side of Medusa where she's like, look, you know, just because you're her daughter, that does not make you responsible for her actions. So she doesn't really hold a grudge against Annabeth in this version, which was interesting to see because Medusa is definitely one to hold a grudge, typically as the way as she is kind of shown in all types of media, you know? So like that was definitely a different version of Medusa that we saw here. And again, like this version of Medusa in a way just she was threatening because she can turn them into stone, but she didn't quite feel as threatening as she did in the book. Because again, that version of Medusa also has claws, and so like in this version, in the show, it's like, oh, if you close your eyes, there's nothing Medusa can do to you, right? But like in the book, Medusa also had claws, so it's like, okay, well, if I close my eyes, like I still have to fight in a way, because it's like she has those claws that she could easily like just scrape me to death, right? So it's like it felt like there was a little more danger with Medusa in the book than really in the show. And in the movie, like really the whole time Medusa is just talking in this tone that is like just supposed to be so inviting for you to open your eyes and willingly be turned into stone. Like, so, but even then, like there was the scene of them running away, again, Percy using his iPod as a reflection to see Medusa. But in the book, like we see that there's like Grover is flying around on his shoes and is like swinging a club around trying to hit Medusa. Like Percy again is kind of swinging with his eyes closed, and I think at one point in the book, like they actually drive a truck into her. Oh wait, no, that's in the movie. That's the movie.
Oh,
that's
is it? Oh, you're right. It is.
Yeah,
It is.
They drive a truck into her in the movie.
That's
But yeah, they do end up cutting off her head in the book. But there's, like I said, there's a whole fight sequence with it, right? Whereas in the show, all that happens is they run away. Like, right? Like, so there's the little scene where Percy is talking to her and she offers to like help Percy like save his mother if he were to give up his friends. And that really didn't happen in the book. Like, again, it was just, oh, well, Medusa's here, we gotta kill her, right?
Yeah.
So then they have the whole fight sequence with her. But like here, like there's not really a fight. Like they run away, they run like into like her chamber that has even more statues, and they're just kind of hiding behind boxes, and then they just wait for Medusa to come around. Again, they close their eyes. Percy's got his sword out and his eyes closed, and then Medusa is just kind of again talking to them. Annabeth throws the Yankees cap on her, then they cut off her head, and that's it. Like there was no real. Okay, this is one scene where I will like give some of the fans credit here, where they say there's really a lack of action. This scene did have a lack of action, because like I said, all that happened was they ran away, they threw the Yankees cap on her, and then they cut off her head. Like, whereas like at least in the movie, like they had the scene where they like ran over her with a truck, like, and then they cut off her head, like. And like I said, in the book, they do end up cutting off her head after like a pretty lengthy fight sequence, and then they end up shipping the head off to Olympus, much like they do in the show. In the movie, they don't ship off the head; they actually keep it. Like they actually keep it, and they use it in the Hydra fight, like I mentioned before.
Yeah, they did.
And then like it was funny because I remember in the movie, like they actually were like staying in a hotel room, and they like threw Medusa's head into the bathtub of ice.
Yeah, that was hysterical.
Like, that scene was funny because I remember Grover is going into the bathroom, and they put sunglasses on Medusa's head, on Medusa's eyes, so that like you wouldn't get frozen, or you wouldn't get turned to stone. So Grover gets ready to go to the bathroom, and then he's like, God, y'all, I can't go to the bathroom with her watching me. Like,
yo, facts, dude.
Like, that was probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Just because, like, literally, they pan over to Grover getting ready to go to the, like, going into the bathroom, and then you just see Medusa's head just staring at him. That to me was hilarious that they just kept taking the head with them. Like,
yeah, like I mean, they essentially like they essentially were using it as like a tool. You know what I mean? Just like an extra like magical item. Like, you know, it's like you're like an RPG and you like defeat an enemy and you like get a special item or something. Like that's kind of like how they treated Medusa's head. As just like a special item that like does something special. And
it's like a spoil of war kind of thing.
Yeah.
And typically, in like Greek mythology, Medusa's head is used as a weapon as well. And they even kind of mention it in the show. Like, look, Percy's like, look, I just took down this Fury without even trying with this thing. Like, this thing is really dangerous, even though Medusa is dead. Like, we can't just leave it out in the open for anybody to have, right? And so that's kind of what draws up the conflict of, well, what do we do with Medusa's head, right? And like I said, in the movie, they just kept it to use as a weapon. In both the book and in the show, they actually send it to Olympus, and Percy is kind of like, nah, we're gonna send this to Olympus. Like, while Grover and Annabeth are very like, I don't know, they're not gonna like that, Percy. Like, and so he ships it off to Olympus. The only difference is that, like, when you send things to Olympus, like, when you write Olympus's address on it, like, Hermes is able to kind of like ship it with his powers over over messages, I guess. So like Hermes did not physically like deliver this one. Like, I guess it literally just popped out of thin air and went to Olympus. Like, whereas we see the scene of Hermes delivering the package to them, to the Olympians in the show, right? So they send it off, and they kind of explain a little bit why. Like, after this scene is that in the book is that Percy is sending his head to Olympus as kind of a way to kind of get their attention, to kind of like really, in a way, kind of like make his dad proud of him. That he's like, look what I accomplished, kind of thing, you know. So they don't really say that in the show, but like that was part of the reason why Percy sent the head to Olympus in the book.
Yeah.
But yeah, they totally just took it in the movie and like literally just threw it in a bathtub to watch Grover go to the bathroom, I guess.
I guess, yeah. It's making him uncomfortable. Have the snake lady staring at him while he's taking the lead.
Yeah. That scene was pretty funny. And then, like, we get to the end of the episode in the show, and that's where they kind of show us where his uncle is. Like, and then, like, Grover makes the mention of, like, oh, well, this is as far as he got on his journey, and, like, and then, like, one thing that I like that they pointed out was that he was like, look at all the other statues, they all look so terrified, yet his Uncle Ferdinand kind of just accepted his fate.
Yeah,
like,
he did. Like, and I think there was like a bit of a like sadness there, like a very somber realization that you know, that like he unfortunately did not you know, accomplish his quest, or wasn't even really given the chance to go far on it at all. Which it's like, you know, like it sucks for Grover because he lost someone that he loved. And it's like, I feel like it's supposed to paint this picture of like almost like a side narrative for Grover. I don't know if they'll actually do this in the show, but it's like, I don't even know if they did this in the book. But, you know, obviously, like, he has this goal of trying to find Pan. And, like, you know, it's almost like screaming, like, yeah, this is going to be very hard, but, like, they're still going to, like, set up for it later. Like, at least it gives me that vibe off first glance, but I don't know if they actually will. But it would be cool to see. But it does suck that his uncle never made it far on his journey. Which, you know,
yeah, and they mentioned in the book that his uncle is on that quest to save Pan. Like, they kind of just, in the show, they kind of just worded it as like it's a quest, but it was actually a quest to save Pan.
Right.
And then that's when he gets caught by Medusa, so he doesn't end up getting anywhere, right? But like, here in the book, in the show, like, that's kind of like one of the last few things we see, is that we see, like, Grover is kind of got like tears welling up in his eyes, and Annabeth and Percy are like, oh, what's going on? Like, and he was like, that's my Uncle Ferdinand right here. Like, so after that scene, that's kind of where we're getting to the end of the episode, where Grover is kind of making like Percy and Annabeth like try and consider each other's feelings, because the whole episode, the whole idea that someone is going to betray him has really been weighing on Percy. And that's why, earlier in the episode, right before they get to the Gnome Emporium, Annabeth is asking him, what are you so afraid of? And he's like, I'm not afraid of anything. She's like, yes, you are. It's clearly, it's written all over your face and by the way that you're acting. And then at the end, Grover is like, now she asked you a question. Answer it. What are you so afraid of? And this is finally where he tells them, he was like, because the Oracle said one of you was supposed to betray me. And then he really goes into detail about why he chose both of them. He was like, me and Annabeth never get along. I figured there's no possible way we can be friends, right? And he was like, and with you, I thought if there was anyone who would never betray me, it was you. And so for Annabeth, because remember, one of the ideas before they shipped off the head to Olympus was leave the invisibility cap on it and just bury it underground. And then Grover tells him, he was like, look, that item is the only thing that she has from her mother, and you just told her to just abandon it so that we can keep this head safe. Grover is really trying to, the whole time Grover has been trying to hold the quest together without upsetting either of them. But he's like, but maybe a little something, maybe we have to upset each other in order to move on, because clearly you guys aren't getting the other person's perspective, right? So, kind of having Grover play mediator here, kind of explain to them, look, this quest is important. Percy is chosen to be one of these people on the quest, but at the same time, his mom's missing, the only person that's ever cared for him.
Right.
And he feels like he's in this situation where he has to choose the fate of the world or his mom. And Grover was telling Annabeth, look, you're not even taking that into consideration of how confused he might be because of this situation that he's in. So I thought that was really cool how they really kind of sat there and made them really think and be like, oh wow, well, I didn't realize how much of a big deal or how sentimental this might be to the other person. So I really liked that aspect of Grover kind of really forcing them to think about each other's feelings.
Yeah, sometimes when you're you're trying to get two people to agree, or rather to get along better, sometimes conflict does need to happen to strengthen those relationships. Sometimes you do need to have an argument with someone to get things out to the open, and so that those things can be sorted, and so those things can be talked about. So it's that was actually a W Grover scene for me. I actually really enjoyed that scene a lot. It made me like Grover a lot more as a character. And Percy and Annabeth, their relationship does get better over time, but that scene definitely probably needed to happen, because otherwise they probably would have been fighting the whole rest of the trip. So.
And to be fair, they still have their little bits where they go at each other from this point on. But definitely this scene in particular, to kind of just have them literally just put everything on the table so that kind of everyone understands each other a little bit more. I think that definitely really needed to happen. And I really liked the way that they played it out in this episode.
Facts.
But yeah, that kind of leads us to the end there, because right after that, that's when, again, they decide to ship off the head. They put it in the box. Hermes delivers it to them, and that's really the end of the episode. This episode was a little bit shorter than the first two, because again, not much happens in this episode. It's really just them starting the quest, them going to Medusa's, and then that's really it. They do kill Alecto at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
Because Percy goes and takes her out with Medusa's head before they ship it to Olympus.
Yeah.
But not really that much happens here. And we're gonna have a couple episodes in the future where it really didn't feel like that much happened. But like also we have to take into consideration that these first 2 episodes were really meant to kind of bring us in.
That's true. Yeah.
Like, because like the first episode, we're being introduced to the world of Percy Jackson. They're kind of setting us up for him going to camp. Then he gets to camp. Episode 2 starts. Percy's starting to kind of learn what demigods are all about. Also, us, the audience. You know, there are plenty of people who are watching this show who, some of them might not have read the books, and some of them might not have read the books in a really long time. So they really have to kind of set up this world for us, because you don't know. Like, yeah, there might be people like me who read the books all the time and have read the books more times than they can count, but there are people who have never read it. There are people who are young kids who weren't even alive when the books came out, and you have people like you who didn't read the books, or I've talked to a couple people that, you know, they watched the show because they read the books when they were a kid. Literally have not read the book in like 10 years. Like, so, you know, you have people kind of all over the spectrum there. So they really had to do a lot of setup for those first 2 episodes. And now that we're here in the third one, the whole focus was on the Gnome Emporium. I mean, literally the episode, I think, is titled, "We Visit the Gnome Emporium." Yeah, we visit the Garden Gnome Emporium. I just looked at it. So, yeah, so like this episode was purely based around that aspect of it, and to kind of tie it off, this little scene, comparing an instance to the book. Remember, in the book, like I mentioned, they didn't have any money or anything, so in order for them to continue to travel, it's weird, but like they kind of showed it off in the show a little bit that Grover is actually able to talk to animals. Satyrs are, because he was talking to that horse that he was forced to take care of after he told Percy about his mom. But like in the book, Grover finds a missing poodle, and the missing poodle is able to read English somehow, and the missing poodle understands that the family that he belongs to is putting out a cash reward for anyone who returns him. And because the poodle likes Grover so much, he's willing to go back to the family so that Grover and the team can have that cash prize as a way to continue their travel west, right? So this scene only matters in the book because they don't have any money. So because they didn't lose all of their money and everything in the bus in this episode, there was really no reason to include that in this episode. So yeah, and plus, like also, does it really matter? Does it really matter that they have the aspect of them getting money from returning a poodle to like travel west? Like, it really doesn't matter. Like, we kind of mentioned this before, but like, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of like these little things were just removed from the show. Like these little scenes that like are kind of humorous at times and kind of cool to see, but like, as far as importance, it really doesn't matter. Like, and so, I mean, so we've seen that here. Like, there was no real need to include that scene because of the way that they wrote this sequence. So, it's one of the things that was like a very minor cut, in my opinion. Like, they could have still included that scene, but that scene doesn't really hold any relevance when they still have all their money. Like, that's why they had to include that in the book, was to give them a way to continue traveling. But here, you know, they already have everything, so they can just get on a train or get on a bus and continue heading west towards St. Louis, which is where the next episode starts. But yeah, I think that's pretty much covers it for this episode. Like I said, this was generally where a lot of people started to get a little skeptical of some of the changes that they were making. Like, generally speaking, a lot of people think the first 2 episodes were a great start, and I agree. Like, I think they really did a good job of hooking people in on the first 2 episodes. But then the 3rd episode is where it kind of goes back and forth a little bit, because they really start introducing more changes, and for some people, those changes just aren't going to hit home like the original book did. So that this is where we kind of start seeing some things, and we might have a couple things that are, a little more negative things to say as we go on, because there are things that I don't like as much, but like overall I felt like this season went really well. But as we get into future episodes, there are going to be some things that me personally I did feel were a little weird changes, but overall I think everything turns out fine. But we're going to be delving into where more of the kind of distaste for some of these changes kind of appears for many people in the fandom as we continue to go on to the rest of the season. So, yeah, I feel like that's really it. We did a really good job of kind of covering everything as far as this episode goes.
Nice.
Like I said, this episode I think was actually much shorter than the rest of them.
Yeah.
Like, I think this episode was only it was actually longer than them. Oh wow, that just goes to show how much they dwelled on this one little part, because the episode I'm looking at it right now was 44 minutes long. So it was longer than the others, and it actually had less happen. So they really had to drag that out.
Yeah, I guess they just dragged it out because they didn't want to get into. I guess they just wanted to make the next part of the series its own thing. I guess maybe they were afraid for it to be only 3 episodes, or not only 3 episodes. They were afraid for the same thing to overlap into the next episode, so they were like, okay, we're gonna harp on this for an episode and then move on to the next topic. I don't know.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that Medusa didn't really need to take any longer than 1 episode, so I think it's fine the way it is.
Yeah, I think it's cool.
But yeah, that is going to be it for this episode of this podcast, the Men of Culture podcast. I hope everybody enjoyed what we had to say about episode 3 of Percy Jackson season 1. We visit the Garden Gnome Emporium. I don't think I have really much else to say left about it, because I think we've pretty much covered it in pretty good detail. If there's anything else that you want to add to kind of wrap up this episode, then by all means go ahead.
I think the only thing I really want to say is that I guess I don't know. This definitely felt like the most it didn't feel like a whole it I guess we had pointed this out earlier, but it didn't feel like a whole 45-minute episode to me when I was watching it. But yeah, I don't know. I the rest of the series for me picks up from here, I guess. But yeah, I don't really have much else to say.
Yeah, the next 2 episodes that we're going to go over in the next couple episodes of our podcast, I actually did enjoy a little bit more than this one. Because, again, it just feels like, and it's partially because, I guess, looking back on it, that this episode is longer than the first 2, and less happens. Less happens in this 3rd episode than what happened in the first 2 episodes, but it's longer. So I think that's why it kind of feels a little lackluster to some people in some way as well, is that, literally the only thing that happens is they go to the Gnome Emporium, and it kind of is dragged out a bit. There's no real fight scene, and we're just kind of listening to Medusa tell her story, and then she tries to get Percy to turn on his friends, and then they run away, and then they cut off her head. And then they kill Electo with the head, and then they ship off the head to Alliance. That's what happens in this episode, and it just takes a long time for them to kind of go through all that.
It was just a lot of time spent on the same subject, I guess. But, I don't really think there's much, I guess, to say about that, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad episode by any means. It definitely was not as good as the first 2. And like I said, I do think episodes 4 and 5 are better. Episode 6, no, it's not better. We'll talk about episode 6 when we get to episode 6 of the podcast. But I generally do think that this was a little bit of a drop, considering that like the first 2 were really good, and then this one was just kind of okay. You know, it wasn't bad by any means. It wasn't great either. It was just kind of an okay episode, if you ask me. But yeah, it was fine. I think there was definitely, you know, this way of showing off Medusa. Like I said, it was interesting. Medusa is not kind of the grudge-holding monster that we see in the books. Like, they kind of try to humanize her a little bit here. So that was kind of a nice little aspect to it. But overall, definitely not the best episode of the series. But, you know, we have a lot more to see, and I'm excited to kind of talk about that more on this podcast. Like I said, next episode we have the episode where they go to St. Louis, and specifically the St. Louis Arc. So, you know, that kind of opens up more for the series, I feel, because we're going to have even more dangers of the quests that all these that our 3 heroes are going to have to, you know, size up to. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for this episode. Again, I hope everybody enjoyed what we had to say about episode 3. You know, if anybody shares kind of the same sentiments as us, then, you know, that'd be cool. If they want to say anything in the comments about it, that'd be, you know, definitely go ahead and say so. I mean, I'm always down to kind of have a conversation about Percy Jackson in general. So, you know, by all means, say what you want in the comments. If you personally love this episode and you think it's the best episode of the season, then say why. But like I said, this was where kind of the split kind of happened, so to speak, because a lot of people from this point on started to have a little bit of mixed feelings about this season. But, you know, we'll go over that in due time as we continue this podcast. But yeah, that's going to be it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll definitely talk to you guys next time. And we'll move on into episode 4. So, hope everyone's looking forward to that, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day.